When creating a video, especially for Professor Chalfa, I wanted to tell a story in a creative way. That way, most people could relate to a story, even though it was my story. I wanted someone to relate, even though probably their mother never had a stroke or some type of traumatic illness. I feel that showing that story in a dramatic sense, most people do understand tragic crisis. And being a student, I had to take a lot of, especially for school, I had to stop and think, do I stop school? I had to quit my job. I had to commute back and forth. I was staying on the campus, but financial issues occurred, so a lot of things had to make changes. And because in this video, I wanted to show that, and I guess with this video, it opened a creative part of me. And this video was very touchy. It was a touchy subject. Writing the script, I tended to cry because I never really thought about it. I would suppress it with other things. And I guess through the video, it showed me as an individual going through the recession, even though I thought that it didn't affect me, but it did. It affected me and my family and a lot of my loved ones.
Okay, so what did I learn from making this? In terms of cinematography and just actually filming, I had a lot of that halfway figured out beforehand. So what I learned the most was really something I've experienced with writing news. When you interview someone and you have, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of interview footage, and you have to cut it down. So you have to be selective there. And it gets even more difficult when you're dealing with a subject like the Great Recession, which is inherently political, which is inherently controversial. And so I had a big sense of not wanting to step on anyone's toes and not wanting to put in anything that seemed too pointed, even though you could probably pull some of that from my work. I was very considerate of that, and having to constantly think about that. I've never dealt with this much content, that was my content on a subject like this. So really working through that was the thing that I learned from the most.
Why were you concerned about stepping on people's toes?
Well, the basic answer to that is because it would alienate my audience. And I mean, as an artist of any kind, you want, well, some artists aren't that way, but you want your audience to be as wide as you can. If you're making it with an agenda, you have a message you want to convey. You want as many people to be able to receive it and decode it and not feel uncertain or threatened by what you presented. So I did it in my own interest. I wanted people to hear what I had to say and what Vivian had to say and what Greg had to say, Dr. George. But so of course, I just didn't want to alienate my audience at all, because it seems like it can be something really easy to do. And I probably would. Like, there are people that would watch what I made, and as soon as she drops that line about social programs and the right wing getting upset, there would be going to be people that say, oh, this socialist liberal kid. So that's a concern that I tried to keep in mind the whole time, and not just not overstep my bounds.
Go ahead.
May I say something to that? Storytelling is political. There's no getting around it. Whose stories get told? That's the political act. And who hears those stories?
And that's kind of where I was, is that I may have stepped on a few toes, but I know a lot of people I didn't step on toes, and I feel like a lot of people were going to see where I was coming from. So there's a trade-off. Like, you reach a certain level and you're like, I don't mind the people that are going to get alienated by this, because I'm still putting my point out the way that I want to. So.
Let me follow up on this even further. Shaquille, are there things that when you were making your story that you wanted to say more forcefully, but you felt sort of constrained to say it?
Not exactly, because Professor Chalfa told us bluntly, this is your story, and whatever you have to say, tell it.
Actually, I think I captured more than I expected to express in my story.
How so?
Well, when I originally was told what the assignment was, and I couldn't think of anything that really affected me directly, Ms. Chalfa told me, think about family members. And so that is precisely what I started doing. And at first I thought of my mother, and doing a silent movie on her, but I really wanted something that had words to it.
Mhm.
And I looked at a picture of my grandfather, and I thought I could try and do something about him, and thought about something that really meant something to me, and that was the restaurant. So because of the assignment, I actually learned how much something meant to me, and I learned that, you know, my world is larger than the tiny little box of my room.
Jesse, can I ask you, following through on this theme, I mean, what is the responsibility of documentary filmmakers in terms of boundaries or pushing buttons, political or emotional? I mean, what would you say to students?
You know what I've said to Tyler, and I'm currently teaching that documentary film class, and I think ultimately it's really just about creating a trust, and that through a relationship with the subject. And the subject could, you know, a number of the students in the class that I'm currently doing the subjects are going to be themselves, most likely. And they're going to perhaps delve into quite personal aspects of their lives. And, you know, there's all kinds of different reasons why you're going to make a given film. And let's say, you know, in this context, a documentary. And for them, it's really kind of through the course of self-discovery. And what I always, what I do tell them time and again is it's all about their comfort level. And there just does have to be a respect for the subject, be it if it's themselves, or most often the case, or more often the case, if it's someone who is not themselves. You just, you know, you are looking to get, you know, something profound, and often that's the thing that's most uncomfortable. So that's kind of a very fine line you have to go for yourself, is you want to push these people to points where they are even learning things about themselves they didn't know they were there, yet done in a framework that they will feel okay with showing it after the fact. Because they might say something, I mean, there's documentaries made all the time where someone will say something and then they'll be like, oh, you can't use that, or you can't show that.
Right.
So.
If, on this theme of economic collapse, what do you think you would do if you could not go to school anymore because of money? There's no money from family, you couldn't find a job, federal grants, education grants disappeared overnight. What do you think your life would look like in a year if none of these things were available to you, and you thought they would never be available to you?
I probably would go into government housing, probably get on food stamps. Because I have a close-knit family, I believe they would help me. Probably if that wasn't an option, I would probably move in with my parents or grandmother, grandparents or whatnot. Or just probably relocate to somewhere totally different. I know I wouldn't be a hobo, per se. I know that I would try other venues, probably get a minimum wage job, something that I could, again, we as Americans try to just stay afloat. We try not to drown in a lot of things, and I believe that if I could just find something that would help me maintain and be stable, that's probably what I would do in the year to come if there was no opportunity for me to go to school or be a college dropout.
Okay. Do you think you could start a business?
I believe I could. I believe I actually want to start a business with men attire, probably blazers and bow ties and all that other things. I would probably do that, and if that didn't fly, I would probably go up into print journalism. Try to find a venue somewhere that I could work there. And because of our economy, you have to have somewhat of a high school diploma or equivalent to that, probably a GED. And if I wasn't able to finish school and get my bachelor's, I don't think that would be difficult, but it would be somewhat of a pressure because of my education. Most jobs and businesses base your salary on the type of education that you have. And because I would probably only have a high school diploma, I probably would, of course, make the minimum.
Okay. Miranda, let me ask you this question about what Shaquille has said. let's say the two of you were going into business together,
Okay.
and you were going into men's attires, high-end blazers, bow ties. How do you see the two of you beginning a small business? What do you think your first steps would be? Here are the conditions. It's a tough question. Here are the conditions. Very little capital to begin with. Very little family support, maybe a little bit. But how would you begin? Can you see how that might work?
I guess this is.
No school,
Okay.
no school loans.
Well, I think I would probably start by making a small Etsy account. I mean, that sounds probably really dumb, but I would probably do that to show what we do have, and definitely go more often to stores like Joann's or Hancock Fabrics or even Walmart to see if they have fabric that's on sale, or even go to places like Goodwill and stuff like that and see if they have old shirts that are really cheap that you can repurpose.
Uh-huh.
And again, make an Etsy account, possibly even other, I guess, websites, and try and promote work that way. Kind of make like a minimal, like a, not a sweatshop per se,
Mhm.
but you make an item and then you sell it, just show people what you have. And
Right,
if
right.
it catches on, then perhaps start doing commissions and things of
Okay.
that sort.
Okay.
I really am not all that business savvy, so I can't really answer it.
Well, it sounded like a little bit of a plan there. Tyler, how long do you think it would take those two to turn a profit?
Oh, yeah. It'd be a while. It would partially depend on where they got that little bit of capital from.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if it's their money, that's one story. If they've had to loan that, that's gonna, of course, affect everything. You're gonna have, I mean, with a market like that, especially in a place like Macon, you're not gonna get off that well, selling high-end clothing or anything, high-end anything really. So it's a tough market. I mean, the market's tough. The capital market's tough. And it would, to flip a profit, I mean, if you were making bow ties out of like, something, I don't know, something really special, you might, I mean, it's possible. You could do it in a year, but the the reality of the situation is that in this climate right now, it would probably take a while to get, to turn a profit. And you'd probably need to move to somewhere like Atlanta, where there'd be more of a market for high-end dress attire for males. It's just not that easy.
Let me ask either one of you students, jump in as you feel inclined. One of the things we do is to make judgments about the world as we see it. And if it is our worst instinct, we are judgmental. And American culture can tend toward the judgmental. When it sees misfortune, it nearly wants to assign the status of a sin to it. There's a particular theme in American culture. Has this project made you think about being judgmental yourselves toward people who are in financial, economic stress?
I'll start that one off.
I think Miranda.
I think what you're getting at there is a generational shift in understanding, because the notion that you're talking about of, you see misfortune and you assume sin or guilt on some part, that has been more true in the past, I believe, and I think it comes from a time, sort of like Vivian referenced in my documentary, and I think a lot of people may agree, they did have it easier then, in the 50s and the 40s. We still call it a golden age in some cases. So when you're coming from a time period like that, that's going to influence your cultural understanding to say, yeah, you probably just made a mistake along the line. I'm 23, and I'm not sure how old you are, Miranda. I know Shaq's just, so we grew up in a world where when I'm 18, coming around the age, I see the mistakes of authority and of institutions, financial institutions, that are not just strictly not the layman's fault, and so that's just a different understanding. So I think that it would affect the minds of older people too, but growing up in that, you almost see it as a pervasive thing, where in so many cases, it's not even just always just the fault of the person that's misfortunate, but it still is in many cases too.
Right.
What I actually learned from this whole entire project was seeing how empathetic people can be. I was so used to, I guess, people being judgmental that I assumed when we shared stories, people were going to try and compare their stories to other people, and then it would become a competition. So either someone would think that they were superior and that they were able to handle all the stress, or someone would want to be the best and that they were the worst off. So what I found was once we actually showed the stories, no one was like that. Everyone was very empathetic towards each other, and we learned that we had a lot in common. So I think that the way we perceive society and the way society actually is doesn't always align. I think our generation is probably a lot more accepting than we're led to believe. Maybe it's because we were in a small classroom, I don't know, but that's what I really got out of the whole.
May I ask another question?
Please, please.
So were you shocked at the troubles that people in your class had?
I wasn't so shocked at the troubles that other people had. I was shocked at the lack of ridicule that students had. I assumed it would be a lot harsher when people were critiquing other people's work. I didn't expect such a level of respect, and it really made me feel humble and very honored in that class.
That's good to hear.
So I was very happy with the experience. Any other questions or?
Shaquille, did you want to?
Oh, yeah, I can tackle that question. Going through life, you have a lot of open questions, and a lot of those questions never get answered, and especially with the economy, a lot of questions that we have, we will never get a straight answer with, and quite frankly, I'm content with that. A lot of answers we don't need, drive us insane.
What do you mean by that?
A lot of information a lot of people don't need to know. And I think secrets are good at certain points in our life. In our life we have moments, and a lot of those moments we have secrets, and those secrets should be kept to keep someone safe from harm or get in harm's way. And with my, like for example, with my parents, they keep a lot of secrets from, parents keep a lot of secrets from their children. Just for instance, if they're having financial issues, they won't just go to their 8-year-old and say, we're about to lose our house. They will probably keep that secret and say, oh, we're just gonna go take a vacation with grandma for about 5-8 months. And kids are like, oh yay, that's wonderful. You just don't do that. And I believe that through this class, I was able to see a lot of stories and a lot of the ways that they portrayed their story. My life crossed those paths, and I didn't realize that happened to me through the Great Recession, like financial issues. I thought that I was okay, but quite frankly, my parents weren't. And because my parents weren't, I wasn't. I wasn't stable. We moved about 4 times. I moved in about 6 schools.
And
so,
over how many years?
in about 3 years. My father lost his job. My mom was relocated through the state. The state was furloughed, and so that cut a lot of activities that me and my brother were involved in. A lot of things we couldn't do because of a lot of the budget cuts that my family had to undergo. A lot of grocery shopping that was, or eating out was limited. And I saw that through one of the stories, one of the young lady's brother, she was the only child, and the aunt, the aunt got sick, I believe, was sick or whatnot, and she had about 5-6 kids. And so she,
8 children.
8 children. So she had to, the sister had to take care of 9 kids, even including hers. And so watching that, I was just amazed because in my household, it was only 4 of us. And I thought that we had it rough, but other people, lives are much, much more worse than what you perceive it to be.
And tell the clincher on that family The family took in 8 children because the aunt got ill. They had one. The mother had been told she could never get pregnant again. She takes in 8 children and finds out she's pregnant and had another baby.
He has 10 kids in one household.
10 kids in one household to
I
take care
don't
of.
know why I laugh, except that I come from a family of 8 children, so that I respond to the number 10. Still, I don't know why I'm laughing. Sydney and Jesse, when you're working with student creators, filmmakers, and you are working with content that's very sensitive, stories students want to tell, whether it's fictional or true life, as it were, documentary, do you feel yourself pulling back critically because you don't want to chill the student out of his or her own story?
I don't think I pull back. I studied digital filmmaking. I studied digital storytelling from Joe Lambert at the Center for Digital Storytelling in Berkeley. And Joe is very upfront with filmmaking, with your stories. Joe is painfully honest with stories.
What kinds of things do you remember him saying?
Tell your story. Tell your story, because nobody's going to tell that story but you. And you are the only person who knows the ins and outs of that story. And people have said to me before, do you think you're a therapist? I am not a therapist, God knows. No, I don't think I'm a therapist, but I do think storytelling is therapeutic. I think we've all got things that we want to tell that are important. So with my students, I say to them, it's your story, and you be honest, but at the same time I say, don't tell anything that you're not comfortable telling. You asked me if I put them on YouTube. I will never put a story on YouTube that a student hasn't said, please put this on YouTube. Because that's their business. That's the way I look at it. But I think that's very important. But what Shaq said about the intersection between the stories and his reality is what I see in the class all the time. And I love, and it leads to wonderful discussion of not just the actual stories, but about issues in life. We have great discussions in the classroom because people are willing to tell their stories.
Jesse, do you pull back critically? You talk less about technique and shape.
Right. I tend to approach all of students' projects differently, and I think it really depends on the student and it depends on the project, and even those two things can be very different. So on the one hand, a student might be quite outgoing, for example, but then when it comes to this certain project, it might be quite private or sensitive or what have you. So I think that for one thing, there's multiple ways of looking at it. One of them being who is it for? So is this an academic project? Is this a commercial project? Is it strictly an artistic venture? I generally lean on the side of not trying to censor students in any way. Though, yeah, I think it's a case-by-case basis in how you frame, I wouldn't even call it criticism, I would call it feedback. And so the way that you engage with feedback, for this project, for example, there was a final deliverable, which was the event that we're currently in.
Right.
So this wasn't, Tyler multiple times said this isn't like a class that we're taking, this is something that he's undertaken himself that I was kind of mentoring along with yourself. And so I think it really is a case-by-case basis. And but I do understand your question. If emotionally it's sensitive, I think you just need to find a way, like I said, let's say these students who are making projects about their own personal lives, you can't say, if the climax is just not really working, but it's about a real catharsis in your life, oh, take it out, it's no good. That's not really the way, that's not really the way, yeah, that part where you have a revelation, it's just, I don't get it. You can't say that, but it's important to be respectful of, with documentary, it's about their filmmaking process is their personal process. So it's just about whoever is on the screen and making sure that they always feel safe and respected. So I wouldn't say that I pull back, I would say that I reframe the way that I approach it.
Okay. And let me turn this question around to the students. Was there a bit of advice each one of you, was there a bit of advice that you felt was useful in terms of editing, making your story that you remember?
I can
Go ahead.
go. I guess the first part of advice that I found very helpful was when I couldn't think of something for myself personally, I asked Ms. Chalfa where else I could look. So that became a helpful piece of advice, and then from the students themselves, if I was struggling with the program, they could help me, and I learned a lot about Mac through this. But I guess I just learned, a tremendous amount, and I actually liked having the restriction of concentrating on the recession, because it allowed me to explore different avenues that I may not have thought of otherwise. And I know for my second story that was not shown here, I decided to try and take an artistic approach that was different from what I heard other people doing. So I ended up using my talent of voice acting by playing two different characters, talking about DIY projects that arose from the recession, so do-it-yourself projects. And I would never have thought about doing that had I not been given this assignment. And so it really helped me, even just on a aesthetic level, to explore and try new things.
Okay, all right. Chuck?
The first day, Professor Chalfa presented information about the Great Recession, and it was a huge packet. We would review it every other class period, just to put ideas in our heads on what to tackle. You could probably talk about the community, or if you didn't think that it hit you personally, like Miranda said, you could talk about family members or whatnot, or you can just talk about religion, politics, some type of way to show a story that you related to, but a story where everyone else can relate to as well. And I believe that the information that she provided, like the backstory about the Great Recession, was essential for us to present a story where that information catapulted us into a world of thinking to be creative. And I think that the digital story allowed us to tell a story creatively, rather than just coming out and say, hello, my name is Shaquille Carswell. That's boring. And people like conflict. If you don't have a conflict in a story, then it's boring. Especially in Once Upon a Time stories, there's always conflict, and at the end, it's a great ending. And I believe that information that she gave us truly helped me with my 3 stories that I was given that semester.
Yeah, Mr. Klein, definitely having an instructor there, someone that's worked with video and film, is obviously helpful. You pretty much have to have that if you're a student just getting into it. But for this, the recent project, the one we watched this evening, the content was sort of like just all me, and just trying to figure out what do you want to talk about, unemployment, housing market. That was just a decision I made on my own there. But the best advice, I guess, that I've gotten from Professor Klein on documentary or storytelling in general even is just having interesting characters, having an interesting, like conflict, like Chad said, you have to have some type of conflict, and you let your characters tell your story and sort of try to let it unfold naturally. And that's easier said than done in many cases.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting you should say that, because in one of your cuts, I framed it a different way, where I talked about the way you introduced the film and the way you ended the film. And I think really what you say there about having a character in the documentary who was compelling. Vivian was a compelling storyteller herself. And I think that some of the other smaller passages you had, sections of the original draft you had, were distracting to the strength of Vivian's story. And there's a lesson in teaching storytelling, when I teach fiction, too many characters in a short story. And that's sort of what was happening right there. Vivian was the protagonist. She was telling her story. And some of the other things that could have made it a larger documentary, had you more minutes to work with. Could have come in a different way, but it seemed to be weakening